we see in e-commerce around sort of the order management process, how it ties into fulfillment and warehouse. Then we'll give a couple of examples of processes we see across our customer base. Oz Development has over 10,000 customers, so we get to see a lot of different best practices, and so we'll sort of highlight a couple at a high level. We'll give you a little bit of overview of Oz Development, and then talk about some customers' success scenarios that we've seen and sort of create our dollar ROI relative to connecting in their growth channels through e-commerce. And then we'll give a very specific Magento QuickBooks demo scenario. And so we'll go through all of that today. So earlier this year, we did a survey around order management with one of our partners. It was NetSuite. And one of the questions we asked was, where are you as a company, the customer base, investing for growth? And this was the result of that. And you can see, so the answers, choices were early stage e-commerce, so companies were in the early stage of developing their e-commerce strategy, expanding a successful e-commerce initiative, expanding marketplaces, so that means selling through eBay, Amazon, Newegg, those sort of type of channels, expanding internationally to customers overseas, adding products and keeping the channel the same, but selling additional products to that, and adding retail stores. So obviously, if looking at early stage e-commerce, expanding marketplaces and successful e-commerce, that creates a pretty big portion of these initiatives here. Also expanding products offered also obviously has implications in the warehouse fulfillment. We'll talk about those implications in a little bit, but clearly so the e-commerce is driving a high level of growth, and that really comes across, you'll see in this next slide, based on even across different industries. So we also segmented it by industry types, so manufacturing, wholesale distribution, e-commerce, retail, and then the fourth category is people who identify themselves as sort of a mixed mode doing all of those things. And certainly the trends we see are that the sort of the clear lines of manufacturing, wholesale distribution, e-commerce are blending. So you're having manufacturers, setting up e-commerce sites, to serve their distributor customers, but also selling maybe it's surplus or certain product lines through eBay, Amazon, and doing more consumer-type purchases and sales through those channels. So again, as those lines get blurred, the mix of different channels is flowing across the different sectors as well. And again, each of these in itself also have implications back in the warehouse. So if you look at sort of those initiatives, we put them down the left here: expanding e-commerce, broader product catalog, serving international customers, expanding the marketplaces, selling through large retailers. We see a lot of that in terms of the trend today, especially for the small and medium-sized companies. And then what are the implications back in the warehouse on things like inventory control, your pick-pack process, label, and ship? So at the top, that's your expanding e-commerce. And some of this depends on the sort of the heritage of the customer and where they're coming from. But if you're a traditional business and you're now expanding an e-commerce initiative, getting that control and inventory visibility and allocating it across, let's say, your new e-commerce channel versus your telesales channel becomes critical. You get an order in, maybe on your website you're showing inventory availability, but at the same time you're taking a sales order and consuming that quantity in-house. So how do you make sure you coordinate that? You don't have too many back orders, those sort of things. So inventory and visibility and control as you're expanding that and expanding those items is obviously quite critical. Supplier dropship programs, and that's really on both sides. We see customers who are leveraging their suppliers so they can carry more catalog items. They don't have to carry the inventory, but also in terms of also selling through large retailers, where those large retailers are carry those goods, but they're asking their partners to dropship on their behalf. So that's some implications in terms of where does the inventory sit in the supply chain as e-commerce sort of drives, and you have multiple parties involved in serving that end consumer. Similarly, if you go through to pick-pack, I won't go through each of these cells, but in terms of pick-pack, you're expanding e-commerce. Let's say you're coming from a manufacturing or wholesale distribution standpoint, the order order mix. So you might be used to selling, case quantity, larger quantities. Now there's going to be more single items. That's going to have an implication on how you staff the warehouse, your processes. Are you doing multi-order picks, those sort of things, and how you streamline that process. And that, again, just understanding that mix and the flow and doing it in an effective, automated, integrated way is going to make sure that your efficiencies meet up with that growth, and your the costs don't outspend the growth from the additional revenues. In another couple of examples, you're looking at expanding marketplaces. That's a fairly hot topic. People going through things like eBay, Amazon, Groupon is another example, and looking at how do you allocate. If you have inventory, how do you allocate and share across as you get more and more of these channels to make sure that you're serving those channels effectively. You're not over. You're allotting the inventory appropriately to where the demand is coming from. So that's a key piece. And different options in terms of leveraging things like Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon, where they're warehousing it, they're fulfilling it, and providing sort of logistics expertise, obviously a revenue opportunity, just different models of how you're going to support that from an information standpoint. And that drives back into requirements in the warehouse, things like we did a customer recently we'll talk about in a couple slides, where they require, their brand, they're doing dropship, they're requiring some branded pack slips. The retailer, in this case it was Groupon, wants to make sure that the customer gets it, it's Groupon branded, it looks like it came from a Groupon as a company.
To add to that, Brian, I think one of the things that isn't really highlighted here, but is very, very common in this scenario, as your e-commerce channels are growing, all these increased sort of demands are happening in your warehouse. The assumption by most companies is, well, we're not adding lots of additional staff to support this growth. So we're trying to get more work done in a more complex fulfillment environment with the same amount of people. So I think that sort of compounds a lot of the challenges that you've highlighted here.
Yeah, and that study we did on the previous two slides, so 88% expected higher growth in the previous year, but expected to keep their warehouse costs of staff the same, not add to the warehouse staff. So again, supporting the revenue growth and driving more and more efficiencies in that warehouse. Again, each of these cells could drive some needs in the warehouse. As you can see, those growth initiatives that companies are focusing on all flow back to more complexity back in the warehouse. Now, in terms of options to integrate with e-commerce, we see a couple different examples or models that are pretty common. One I call channel-centric. So it's maybe a company that started out selling things on eBay or Amazon or maybe their own e-commerce platform, and they've really built their business on that growth. They may have a Volusion site. They print an invoice out of Volusion. They do the picking, and they need integration from that shopping cart Volusion directly into, let's say, WorldShip, process the shipment, update the tracking number right back into the shopping cart. That could be Magento, Volusion, BigCommerce, what have you. The second model is what I call order-centric, and typically that's a company that maybe has started out more. They've had an order, a sales team. They've been taking orders. They maybe type them in. They've added e-commerce, a website. Maybe since they've added a website, they also start to sell on things like eBay, Amazon, and they're very good at managing that order from the time it comes in through the warehouse and fulfillment, and they want to streamline that for these new channels. And typically what they do is they feed those orders into their ERP system, and that could be QuickBooks, it could be NetSuite, Sage, any number of different ERP systems. And then the ERP drives the warehouse process, producing that pack slip, those things, integrating in with the shipping systems. In some cases, integrating, we have a set of mobile solutions that improve the warehousing process. But the ERP really becomes sort of the system of record for those orders, for the inventory, for the costs, those sort of things. So those are a couple flavors that we see. So the sort of pros and cons and where they fit. On the left, I call sort of someone e-commerce born. That's where they grew up. They were born on net. And typically one channel dominates. They've built their business around one of those dominant channels. A customer I was speaking to yesterday, they sell pretty much everything on eBay. They're looking at Amazon. They have their own website, but their business is really built around that eBay model. Obviously, it supports for growth in single channel. That's why they've been successful. It does become harder to automate things around inventory control as you add other channels, and adding those channels becomes harder, both from a process standpoint, from a technology and integration platform standpoint. So on the right, you have your order-centric. Again, as I talked about earlier, so they have a traditional sales channel usually. They've added e-commerce as a growth opportunity. It typically is their biggest growth opportunity, so it's very important, obviously. It provides more flexibility across the channels, and it becomes more scalable long-term. So we see companies also going from the left side here, channel-centric to order-centric. And in some cases, they may start with QuickBooks, and all it's doing is the accounting. They're not using it for order management, and they either then start using it on the right, or they may migrate up to higher-end solution.
And Brian, an example of one of those order-centric companies, we were working with a company recently. They sell, they're a manufacturer of golf clubs. And so they're a traditional sort of wholesale distribution business. And one of the things that they had recently launched was an eBay store. And what they were doing is they were taking essentially clubs that had gone out as demo clubs and had been out someplace that had been used for a demo day. And then all these clubs were coming back to them, and they were basically new, but they'd have a few scratches or things on them. They were trying to figure out a good way to to recoup some of that cost that went into those clubs. And so they launched an e-commerce store through eBay. And so this was something where their warehouse operations were really used to large, bulk, wholesale orders, not one order for $25 or $50 single golf club. So that created, I think, more challenges in the warehouse than they had expected, because those customers were fairly demanding on their requirements for getting their clubs, getting them in hand correctly and quickly. So for a pretty large wholesale type business, that idea of opening up a new channel, which seemed like sort of a nice, simple idea, became fairly challenging in the warehouse and somewhat disruptive. So through some automation, they were able to maintain a high customer satisfaction rating through their eBay store and not have a major disruption on their traditional wholesale distribution business.
Now let me just talk a bit about what Oz does, Oz Development. And Oz Development is the name of the company. Oz Link is the solution. What we do is we integrate and automate around the order management process. So a company has their core ERP. We pull orders in from various e-commerce channels. And often in that case, we may add additional business rules on top of that. I'll talk about a couple of examples where we do some screening for fraud or maybe some address validation on that front end to sort of mitigate any issues before it gets into the warehouse. Then the warehouse, again, same sort of thing, integrating with systems in the warehouse solutions where we can provide extensions to the ERP into the warehouse, things like branded packs, that I'll give a couple examples later. Or even we have, depending on the ERP, it might be as simple as sending an email out to a customer, confirmation email, brand email with the order information and tracking information. Again, that's where most modern e-commerce platforms do that. But if a customer has multiple channels, they have a sales channel where someone's taking orders over the phone, entering into the ERP system, the legacy systems or even some things like QuickBooks aren't great at communicating that back out to the customer. So there's sort of some extensions that we might do. And then also tying into shipping, providing business rules, selecting the right carrier service, those sort of things based on those shipments. And if you're customers that maybe historically were wholesale distribution and now they're doing more B2C e-commerce, they'll end up doing more residential type deliveries. So leveraging things like SurePost or mail innovations, depending on the weight of the product and where it's going, are things that they can automate as part of those business rules. Now, some examples of that, the extensions that we provide, or we call them edge applications. And here's a few examples. So on the e-commerce side, routing. So we have a customer where they have a number of locations. They get an order in. Based on where they're shipping it to, and where the inventory is, they want to know what the best location to fulfill that order from. As I talked about earlier, if you're doing more residential type deliveries or you need to validate the address to make sure that you're shipping to the right place, you don't want to to get returned, customer satisfaction issues, or charges from the carrier, being able to validate those addresses, or order screening. And we have an example, a concrete example in a couple of slides of order screening. In the warehouse, again, depending on the mix, you may be doing some batch processing. Again, if there's a lot of single type orders of the same item, maybe doing that in batches of 20 or 25. That might mix in with some of the other types of larger order picks you're doing, and being able to automate and streamline that process. Those are the type of things we do. With the NetSuite customer base, we do a lot of wireless picking and wireless PO receiving. So again, some extensions into the warehouse. And then in shipping, I talked about the business rules, but there may be additional things like freight, bill of lading that gets generated, or if you're shipping back to those large retailers, they often require advanced ship notices or compliant labels, and those are the things we do. Now, from a technology standpoint, we build that on our platform, and we've done integrations to 20 to 25 different hosts. And then we have a set of utilities that streamline that implementation and make it very rapid. So the payback for customers is typically, they get implemented in 2 to 4 weeks, and they get a payback, either within a few weeks after that, or certainly at the most, a couple months out. And here's some examples of the hosts we integrate to. In the middle, wide variety of ERP hosts. Today's topic around e-commerce really see that's a growth area. Obviously, most people have worked with things like Amazon, eBay as consumers. That's a growth area, again, across the different industries, not just B2C e-commerce companies, but manufacturing companies. Maybe Troy's example where getting rid of some secondhand golf clubs, might be parts, spare parts that have become surplus, selling those off through Amazon, or it might be just we have a customer who does solar equipment, and they have a different price point for the same items, different branded, and they sell that through Amazon as opposed to their own website, where they have a different sort of pricing and merchandising strategy. Groupon is, again, a newer one we've seen more recently, and that creates its own challenge in the warehouse in terms of it's typically not a steady stream of orders. You run a Groupon event, and then maybe you get 500 orders that have to get fulfilled in the next few days. So streamlining that in process that's efficient becomes a challenge in itself. And again, usually it's one, the promotion is around a single item. So things like batch processing, batch picking, obviously depending on the size of the item, becomes maybe an effective way to do that.
And also, Brian, all the way over on the right, there's some sort of common technologies. Sometimes we'll talk with a company that will say, I may be using a Sage ERP system, but I've got this other database, or I've got this other system, or maybe even a partner system that I also need to get some order data from, or some product information from, or maybe it's a CRM system, and we need to pull an email address from some other system as well. So one of the things that we bring to the table as far as that integration and streamlining processes is the ability not only to integrate and provide automation with some of the systems you see in the left and the center column here, but if you've got a system you've built internally or something that maybe is industry specific, the platform you mentioned earlier gives us that flexibility to be able to share information, apply business rules with some technology that maybe not is, or maybe contained within a system not as popular as some of the core host systems that you see here.
And there is a question here that came in from the audience. What about 3PLs? And since we're talking about integration, and the question might be a couple things, but certainly being able to integrate with a company's 3PL, we've done that before, where you're changing. It could be exchanging orders and getting order status up back into your system, so you get visibility to that order that your 3PL is fulfilling, and as well as it might be inventory updates that are going back and forth from an integration standpoint.
Yeah, and I guess the other one that I would add to that is potentially if you are a 3PL and you're looking to get orders from different customers, we've got a company that we do some work with today that they provide lots of consumable goods that you might buy as a home consumer, like an air purifier for your house. Well, this company specializes on selling the filters, as an example, for that type of industry. So if you're a 3PL and You need to get order information back into your own internal system. You may need to support some of the customer-specific branded packing slips, but then also being able to go back and tell your partners that these orders have actually been fulfilled, and here's tracking details. Sending off those branded email notifications are things that can be supported in that 3PL environment.
Yeah, and this is an example set of application we have integrated to, and not by any means a complete set. Typically through the engagement process with customers, if it's a system we haven't sort of seen before, we'll have a call with the IT group or the consultant who's working with the company from an IT perspective, and just say, hey, here's the different tools we can use, and it might be some on the right, might be web services, a ODBC type connection, a number of different options, or they maybe have a very open, clean API that we can pull that data from. So if there's applications that you haven't that aren't on here, certainly having a one-on-one call, we can explain how we can do it, or whether we can't do it. Either way. So some customer examples. At the top here on the left with eCommerce, Rock Bottom Golf. That's an integration between Channel Advisor and NetSuite. So orders they're selling a lot. They grew up on selling a lot of golf balls on eBay and become a dominant player in the online golf merchandise. And they use Channel Advisor. Channel Advisor provides a bridge between multiple marketplaces. And the study we did also showed that a lot of companies are exploring marketplaces, but managing the interactions is typically manual. Channel Advisor is a great solution for that. Not only does it integrate orders, but things like inventory, pricing, merchandising programs across your channels, you can leverage Channel Advisor for. Now, what we do in this case is, as those orders come in, beyond just the integration, we do some screening and flag orders that might need review prior to being released to the warehouse. What they found was there were certain orders being, sort of 4 or 5 golf bags being ordered and sent to China that ended up, being fairly suspicious in terms of, fraud, and the credit card might not get reversed later on. So being able to detect those based on order attributes, sending to a pending approval queue, they can review them and confirm that they're really orders that they want to actually fulfill, and they'll get paid for.
Another example, Brian, in that e-commerce is Royal Oak Peanut. So this is a company who essentially is a farm, and that's really their primary business. But they sell lots of items now via e-commerce, lots of gift-type items and things of that nature. And what they found is during holiday seasons, they would become extremely busy, and they really didn't have the staff to be able to manage all the orders. What happened was they had a Magento shopping cart, and they were manually copying and pasting all of the order information from Magento into their internal ERP or accounting system, which was QuickBooks. And then they would end up shipping the orders out of QuickBooks through the UPS WorldShip software. And then came the second challenge they faced was they now needed to go back and update Magento, because Magento was the system that was actually going back and communicating with the customer to say your order's been shipped. And that was sort of the customer-facing portal for Royal Oak. So in that scenario, what we did was we had an automated process to extract all the orders out of Magento, put them into QuickBooks, and then ultimately, once we used Oslink to ship those orders through UPS, we could update both QuickBooks and Magento with that tracking information and that order status. So what used to be at least a full-time job of manually getting information out of Magento and then updating Magento was streamlined to now be an automated process. And I think the ROI at Royal Oak was 30 days or so for that integration, and that wasn't even in a super busy holiday period.
Another example, Shoe Station, where they have, I think, 15, 16 different locations. They get an order in, and based on the geography of the consumer, where they have inventory, picking where that should get fulfilled from to obviously leverage inventory, minimize shipping costs, being able to sort of order routing capability or sort of extensions we do as we put in that order into the ERP system. Another example in the middle is IBEX. They do um, outdoor clothing, all wool clothing, high-end wool clothing. And they have both a wholesale channel, they have a B2C channel to consumers, as well as a store. So multiple channels. They sell internationally to retailers overseas, which, in those orders, for something like Japan, for a seasonal type piece of clothing, they're sending large palletized. So the mix of order types and volume really is varies quite a bit. Their peak depends, obviously, the wholesale peak comes a little earlier, the consumer peak comes a little later, and in that case, we've done wireless picking, PO receiving, inventory cycle counts from a mobile device right into NetSuite.
Another example would be Lionel NASCAR, and this to me is a really interesting one because most people know both of these brand names of Lionel and NASCAR. So what happened, Lionel and NASCAR, they sell the replica race cars, and that was their primary warehouse down in North Carolina's job, was selling these die-cast race cars, mainly through an e-commerce platform, but also they had a wholesale piece of business that they did. But the lion's share of their business was race cars, nice, small, square boxes going out in very high volumes. Well, what happened was they merged and they took all of the business from the Lionel trains and merged that into the NASCAR warehouse. So they went from a situation where they had mainly a business-to-consumer environment, a pretty traditional e-commerce environment, to this enormous wholesale business on the Lionel train side. And as you can imagine, coming into the holiday season, for example, they're shipping huge orders to every major retailer from Walmart to Target to Sears to JCPenney. So the idea that they needed was integration with their ERP system, which happened to be NetSuite, and an ability to automatically process certain types of orders in a batch. For example, single car orders could be batch processed and go out the door very, very quickly. However, on the Lionel side, they really needed more of a packing verification process. So they were sending out hundreds and hundreds of items. They wanted to go through and make sure, as they were building these pallets for shipment to a Target or a Walmart, that only the correct products were being sent off to those customers. So it was a very, very diverse warehouse. But within that single facility, they had different types of orders that really had very, very different requirements. And at first, that was extremely challenging for the staff at the warehouse. But again, through automation, we were able to save time, ensure that mistakes weren't made in those various processes.
Okay, then here's an example, and this is the Royal Oak scenario that Troy talked about, where Magento has the shopping cart, e-commerce platform out front, taking those orders in, feeding that into QuickBooks, and again, there could be other orders that are coming in from a salesperson entering in QuickBooks. So now QuickBooks is the system of record for those orders, and then processing that order, getting it fulfilled out of QuickBooks, printing the pick ticket, and then servicing that at the WorldShip station. We basically pull that order down out of QuickBooks, capture the cost and tracking, update QuickBooks, but at the same time update that tracking information in parallel back to Magento, which then does communication back out to the customer in terms of their order steps. So the synchronization of the systems and the customer experience and visibility is very efficient. And prior to this, these things were being done in a manual process. So typing things into QuickBooks, pulling them, typing them into WorldShip, updating back into QuickBooks, updating them in Magento, and obviously beyond just the cost of doing that, the clerical costs, the time it took, there's also the potentially errors that could happen, and maybe that doesn't get updated. The customer thinks their order isn't coming. They call back in. They're disappointed. So just driving that automation and efficiency in this order-centric model really drove quite a bit of payback very quickly. And this is another example, a little channel-centric. but the customer had a Groupon. They just started working with Groupon, and they didn't have a great way to fulfill those in a very effective way. They'd get they'd run that event. They may get 300 or 400 orders that they had to fulfill fairly quickly. And then Groupon had requirements to do a brand pack flip. So in this case, Link integrated the Groupon has a technology called Commerce Interface that provides those orders. It provides a batch order file, and then Link creates, it's on the right here, a branded combo pack slip, which we call. So on the top is the pack slip branded based on that channel, Groupon, and if a customer has multiple channels, they can create always the branded pack slip for each one. So it could be, Groupon, maybe you're drop shipping on behalf of Lowe's or Sears or one of those sorts of things. Automating that process so that the person in the warehouse doesn't have to remember the channel, doesn't have to remember the documentation requirements. And then in this case, there's also a UPS label on the bottom as part of that process. So they maybe print off their 25 orders. They go grab the items, put the label on the box, ready to go.
And to add to that, Brian, one of the companies that we were working with that was selling through Groupon, one of the things they were saying was when they started out with Groupon, they would get 50 or 100 orders through their Groupon event, but their items started, or their Groupon event started growing, and it ended up that they might have 1,000 or 1,500 orders, and they said they weren't really able to keep up and get those orders out the door as quickly as possible, and Groupon for some period of time had been, I guess, kind of flexible with this company, saying, yes, we want them out as quickly as we can, but it sounds like they're sort of tightening that up. So they're demanding of their partner companies that are selling items that once that Groupon sale or event has ended, those items need to go out the door quickly. And not only do they need to go out the door, but the Groupon Commerce Interface system has to be updated with tracking information in a much more timely manner. Some of you selling through Amazon, you've certainly seen those requirements become a little bit more stringent over the past year or two, and Groupon is certainly following suit. So what this type of process allowed a small business to do was get those orders out really the same day they received them and no longer have that concern about 2 or 3 day lag time to get all the orders out, and kept them in good standing with Groupon and made it easy for them to have additional successful events with Groupon going forward.
The other thing to think about is there's a question here about, can you create a combo pack slip, let's say, out of Magento with the UPS label on the bottom. Both these scenarios, always on the left, it could be Groupon, it could be your retail fulfillment, it could be Magento. The systems on the left really can be, and often are multiple different systems that you're pulling the data in from, the orders in from. And then on the right, the pack slips, again, are going to be driven by the channel. So in a more complex scenario, you may have 3 or 4 different channels on the left, Groupon, Amazon, Buy.com, or those. On the right, you have corresponding pack slips that represent those channels, maybe some business rules around those channels in terms of, showing charges, not showing charges, those sort of things, and then the appropriate rules to pick the right UPS service. It's SurePost, it's Ground, those sort of things, and that's flexibility is what provides the ability to scale those e-commerce platforms while keeping the cost and the process pretty consistent, and automated in the back in the warehouse. So when we talk about automating the business rules, what we're really looking at is looking at all the various shipment details, order details, and picking the right UPS service. And it could be, focused on the end customer. Maybe they're a frequent buyer. You have something, Amazon Prime type things where you're providing, free shipping to these customers that have certain orders. That data often is in either the e-commerce platform or back in your ERP, so being able to pull that out and provide that becomes critical from an integration standpoint. But it might be just simple things like, hey, things over this weight go Ground, under this weight go SurePost, or Mail Innovations. High dollar items might be, require insurance or proof of delivery. Really any attribute of that shipment, whether it's the specific shipment details, who it's going to, or where it's coming from, can all be used to apply business rules to pick the right UPS service. And then here's some other examples of branded pack slips, talked about earlier. So, if you have 3 or 4 different channels requiring different branded pack slips, and you're adding new ones, requiring and instead of having your warehouse person, packing person, or shipping person remember what documents have to be produced can be extremely, costly, especially if they pick the wrong one.
Yeah, an example of that is we've been working with an apparel company that would sell through Sears and JCPenney, and I think that's where these sample packing slips may have even come from. And they had a few other partners as well that they were shipping through. But one day they got a phone call from Sears because they had shipped out an order, and prior to having an automated process for generating the branded packing slips, they had accidentally put in a JCPenney branded packing slip. So this customer received their item, but called up Sears going, hey, we got the right item, we're happy with it, there's no issues. But it came with a packing slip that said we bought it from Sears. This customer had actually reached out to their credit card company and expressed some concern, or this customer, excuse me, that, what had happened here, because these were 2 very different businesses. And ultimately, this apparel company was shut off from having their products sold through Sears or JCPenney for a number of weeks until they could prove that they had an automated way to ensure that the correct packing slip went in the box. And when they first called, this represented almost 60% of the business for this apparel company. So when Sears called and said, no, we're shutting you off, that was a major, major problem. So the goal here when we provide branded type packing slips or automation like the Groupon example a minute ago is we don't want to rely on the people in the warehouse to make lots of decisions. Let's have the software be smart enough to make any important decisions to try and allow those people to focus on getting orders out the door and not so much making decisions about what carrier service level to use or what packing slip to put inside the package.
And then as the mix of wholesale versus consumer, there may be different options and needs in terms of streamlining that process. So I talked earlier about the Groupon, or if there's scenarios where customers are shipping a large number of the same type of item, doing that in a batch process, multi-order picking can become very effective. Or maybe multi-item orders, but you want to really minimize that walk space through the warehouse, providing sort of a master pick plan to pick all the items from those orders, take them to a station, and be able to pack them there.
Brian, I just want to pause. We got a note through the chat that said somebody could not hear us. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick somebody here. And Russ, I know you from UPS. So Russ, I'm going to unmute you here. You would be sent a pin through the GoToMeeting. If you could just type in that pin, I just want to confirm that you can hear us okay. Hopefully you can help me out and do that.
It's back now.
Great. All right, we got confirmation that it should be back. So if anybody else is having any trouble hearing, please use the chat. Just let us know. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So again, looking at the different pick scenarios in the warehouse, being able to automate those, and as Troy said, to minimize the decisions and trying to thinking about which process to use, but actually focus on executing, getting those orders out in the most effective way. So now we're going to just step through the example that we talked about earlier, specifically around you're getting an order into Magento, feeding those orders into QuickBooks, and processing that shipment, and updating Magento and QuickBooks.
Sure. So this is a shot of a Magento store. So essentially, this is showing a series of orders that have come into the system that have not yet been processed. The example that I had given earlier, historically what would happen is a person would click on each one of these orders and go into their accounting system and start typing in each of the orders. As this process works now, they have this Insert Orders button. If they go ahead, they click that button, what Auslink's going to do is it's going to extract all of the orders and push them into the accounting or order management system. In this example, it's QuickBooks. So if we hit OK, automatically inserted into my QuickBooks accounting system are all of those new orders that were pending from the Magento shopping cart in this example. And here there's 6 or 7 orders, but that could be 100 orders or 500 orders. But with a single button click, those orders are pushed into the QuickBooks system. In this example, the way it's configured is once that order is in QuickBooks, I can now go ahead and process a shipment through my UPS WorldShip software simply by entering my order number into the offline toolbar and clicking the UPS button. So now we're going to take all of the order details out of QuickBooks, push them into the UPS WorldShip software, and as we've touched on, if that means applying certain business rules like upgrading the service level based on a delivery commitment, or populating a reference field, or declared value, or changing the name on the return address section of the shipping label, any of those business rules can be automatically applied. And from a user standpoint, I'm going to put the box on the scale and hit process shipment to print out my shipping label. Once I've printed my shipping label through WorldShip, Offlink's going to go back and it's going to perform a couple of different updates. One is back inside of the core accounting system, QuickBooks. So if I look at the order in QuickBooks, I can see how it shipped, when it shipped, what it cost, tracking information, all back inside my accounting system. I also have the ability to see that same information back in Magento. So in this particular case, if my customer, or when my customer gets the email, they can actually log back into the Magento site and they can see, here's my tracking information. They can track that package directly from inside of the e-commerce platform. And this is all done automatically so that I'm no longer cutting and pasting. I no longer need to rely on a person to remember to perform these updates and hopefully not make a mistake. In this scenario, as soon as my label prints, these updates happen automatically. So I'm ensured that they're both done, and it really is going to cut down on opportunity for mistake, but also a reason for a customer to have to call us and check to say, did my order ship yet? What's the status of the order? We're going to proactively provide that information back to the customer.
And also it's leveraging the sort of core business applications that the customer has. They've invested in Magento to drive their e-commerce. QuickBooks does the orders, inventory, accounting pieces, and the shipping. So it's really leveraging that. It's providing a fairly simple, from a user experience, way to streamline that process.
And Brian, just 2 quick questions had come in regard to that example there. One question was talking about, in the scenario that we just went through, does that create a new customer in QuickBooks? And that's a really good question because it can create a new customer. What we typically are going to do is we're going to look and see if that customer already exists inside of QuickBooks. So if it exists already, then we're just going to create a new order for that customer. However, if it's a brand new customer, we'll create that customer record, then create the order for that customer, and it all happens automatically.
I mean, the other things that integration point that you should consider and think about is inventory coming back out, so you have a core ERP system with the inventory quantities, feeding that back out to Magento, or your e-commerce application could be Magento or Channel Advisor, and then also pricing and item information. So those are synchronized in terms of where your system of record is. You can synchronize that back out. So now, just to summarize and conclude for today, just a few things from a checklist is: are your e-commerce orders seamlessly integrated into your fulfillment process? I think we've seen lots of examples, both from a theory as well as some concrete customer examples. We've seen some best practices and some improvements. And then thinking about how can you improve your inventory control to better service your e-commerce channels. Again, what I just mentioned earlier about maybe synchronizing inventory quantities or coordinating that order-centric integration so that all your different channels are feeding into that same system of record. So you do have control over selling what you have in stock and making sure that you don't have any stock outs, minimize back orders, those sort of things. And then just thinking about what are the manual processes in your warehouse that that come from channel requirements. Again, it could be that branded pack slip, could be UCC 128 labels, things like ASNs, all those sort of things. Depending on the channel, maybe your own channel, you want to send out an email notification to your customer confirming the delivery, where certain channels won't allow you to do that. If you're selling on behalf of Amazon, they want to control that communication. So each channel has requirements. If you're handling those manually, that's an opportunity to improve it. And then as you expand your e-commerce channels, so people adding things like Amazon or Groupon, as you add those, is the process scalable to support that? You don't need to add additional staff or change the process dramatically on the backside if you can automate a lot of it. So this brings us to an end. Appreciate everyone's time. There are a couple questions I think left, but we have answered a lot of them as we went through it here. Here's a question around, have you ever built this on a ShipWorks system? That's a lot like Magento.
So we've done some integration with ShipWorks, not a tremendous amount, but we've had some customers that say, for example, they want to use UPS SurePost or Mail Innovation, and so they're looking for a way to extract certain orders that they're not able to process directly in ShipWorks and be able to process those out through the UPS WorldShip software. So that is something we've done for a small number of companies today. More frequently, we'll provide integration to other e-commerce platforms like a Volusion, like a NetSuite, Salesforce.com, or Commerce Hub. It's certainly a bit more common than that.
And here's a question that came in a bit earlier. Do folks offer actual e-commerce platforms or more integration? And we're really focused on the integration. We don't sell the integration platforms, but we will integrate them into either the shipping, the warehouse, or the ERP systems. Are there many B2C, B2B sales platforms that you can't sync with GP? I mean, we have, we've done a lot of different e-commerce platforms, and we integrate to many back-end hosts. So what I suggest is, if there's specific ones that you have in mind, you can reach out to us. We can tell you, we'll tell you, hey, we've done that, 25 times, or we haven't done it, but here's a technology approach that we think we can do it with. But getting into the details is probably the most important.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, that within the platform that we use for the integration, I guess sort of the analogy that I think of is, it's really a toolkit. So I've got a toolkit that I may be coming along and using a web services interface or an ODBC interface or an XML interface, TCP/IP posting interface. Our approach through the platform is to be able to come in and communicate with different systems on a wide variety of technologies. So most e-commerce platforms today have a sort of documented approach in which they'd like you to use to share information with the platform. And as Brian said, kind of 9 out of 10 cases, those different systems are things that if we haven't integrated with them before, we can still do so based on the platform that we have, and do it in an economical way, not a process where it's a $30,000, $40,000 type of project.
Yeah, and then if we've worked at that platform, that may dictate how the process gets handled to some degree based on the limitations of that platform. For example, some e-commerce platforms are not as good at handling sort of the status while orders are in the warehouse, but once it's shipped, updating the tracking number, they automate that status update. Others are more flexible in terms of adding things like pending fulfillment, fulfilled, and shipped statuses in there. So those are the types of things that we can come back and say, hey, here's the best way to do that, and that might say, hey, it's better to do if you want to do a batch process, here's a way to do it, or maybe different options on how to approach different requirements from your side. Okay, I think that brings the end of today's sessions and the end of the questions. Again, I appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. I realize everyone's busy. And if you do have any questions, you can reach out to us at 508-366-1969, or you can send an email to sales@ozdevelopment.com. You can also do some self-serve, and you can look. We have a YouTube channel which has many videos that you can see product in action. Demos are 2 to 3 minutes, so it doesn't take a huge time investment. We also have a couple of specialized microsites, one for folks on warehouse shipping that highlights our UPS solutions, and that's at www.ozdevelopment.com/UPSready. Another one for NetSuite solutions, which is ozdevelopment.com/NetSuite. And then to keep in touch, if you want to connect and join our LinkedIn group, we promote various thought pieces or webinars or product updates and other customer discussions in that forum. So again, thank you for the time and have a great day.